What's up, everybody? My name is Shannon, and I am still waiting for my Satyr, and this is not a day that I normally upload, and this is not a video that I also normally upload. I don't really know what to call this. I guess maybe like my journey with the Fallen Kingdom series by Morgan Rhodes. I have been reading these books since I was in high school, and I recently wrapped up the series. I finally read the 6th book, which is Immortal Reign, and I just had a lot of thoughts about it, and I wanted to talk about it. So I have my stack here of all of my Fallen Kingdom books. I don't have Immortal Reign because I listened to it, but I have all of the rest of these, and specifically my Fallen Kingdoms book is like falling apart because I read it right when it came out. I found it at Walmart and I really loved it. I read it I think I read it 3 times just straight in a row. I made my friends read it, and I absolutely adored that book. And as the series continued, my excitement and my enjoyment of it really started to wane. Fallen Kingdoms, if you don't know, I like to explain that this book is kind of like Game of Thrones light, in that we start off very contained, and we're on this island called Mythica, and there's rumors of magic, but it's kind of been lost, and we have like evil kings and like these plots, and it gets really complicated like really fast, and it's really interesting, and then we've got like all these characters that are really intermingling. As the story goes on, things get bigger and bigger, and the plot, thickens, and it gets more complicated, and more characters are added, and people die, and like all this kind of craziness, but we're always focused in on 4 characters, which is Prince Magnus, Princess Cleo, Princess Lucia, and then Jonas Agalon. They are always the main focus, and they are all extremely different, and they all start off this series in a very different place than where they end up. But as the story was going on, things get a little bit too complicated, things get a little messy, and characters are introduced, and we're talking about certain things, and then suddenly they die, and then we don't ever mention them again, and there are plot points that happen, and then they get dropped, and it gets very hard to follow. And these books, I don't remember when the first one came out. I don't remember if I was a freshman or if I was a sophomore, but I've been reading this series for a very long time, and there was a lot of time between each book. As they would come out, I would forget things, I would try to reread them, I'd never get around to it, and by the time I got to the 4th book, I really just didn't want to do it anymore. Frozen Tides was one where I bought it and then it sat on my shelf for like 2 years. I couldn't read it anymore. Something about the story, I was really attached to Lucia. I didn't like where her story was going. I was forgetting things. I didn't really like the Watchers aspect of the story, and things weren't making any sense. So I just felt really discouraged about it. But then when I finally did read Frozen Tides, I was sucked back in again to this like magical world with like the water kindred and the fire magic and like all this kind of stuff. And I was really into it. And that's also where things start to speed up and they get a little bit more interesting. And suddenly our characters are moving into position that it feels like they had always been working towards, and we get more romance introduced to the story, more romance that might be lasting a little bit longer, and it just suddenly felt more tangible again. And so I was really excited to finally, continue with the series, but then when I got to Crystal Storm, it just kind of all fell apart again. Things got complicated, and it's such a hot mess by the time you get to the 5th book. So I waited a really long time to read Immortal Reign. I knew that it was out. I knew this book came out like a year ago, but I just didn't want to do it. I knew I didn't want to read it. I knew I was going to have to listen to it so I could get through it. So I waited and waited and waited for it to become available at my library. And it's probably the best one out of the entire series. It's amazing. As far as conclusions go for a book series, Immortal Reign just hits it out of the park. The way that it wraps up everybody's stories feels so satisfying. The way that it answers so many questions, the way that it all leads off just feels so right, and I really, truly loved it. The enemies to lovers romance. Okay, if you've never read Fallen Kingdoms, it has probably the best enemies to lovers romance ever, and the way that it all works out in Immortal Reign is just like, if you need a reason to read this series, just read it for this enemies to lovers, because it's really great. I was loving this book like from start to finish. I couldn't stop listening to it. I listened to it so quickly, but I was really kind of at a dilemma for, I don't really want to make a video for it. It's the 6th one in the series. If you've seen any of my videos for this series, they are a hot mess. They are all over the place. They're mixed in with reviews for other books. Like, I don't know what I was doing, but I just knew that I needed to talk about it because it was so well done. Like, Morgan Rhodes just really wrapped up things in a way that just felt right. I felt like with Crystal Storm, it felt like things were getting dragged out. It felt like things were, you know, taking too long. It was getting too messy. Characters were getting confusing. And in this book, I feel like she knew that, like, it was time to end it. She knew that it was time to, like, you know, all of the stuff with the Watchers doesn't really get mentioned as much. She kind of just wraps it up pretty quickly in a way that's easy to understand, the stuff with Kracia as well. And it just made it a lot easier to swallow, and it made the ending just so satisfying and really emotional. Like, I've been with Magnus, Cleo, Lucia, and Jonas for a very long time, most of my now adult life, I guess. So seeing their story come to an end and seeing where they end up was just a really interesting experience, and it was absolutely amazing, and it made me want to reread Falling Kingdoms. It made me want to reread them and just try again, and now is probably the perfect time to do that. I don't know if I will. We've got a lot of Star Wars books coming out, so maybe eventually, but I would like to go back through and try to redo them. So that's kind of my experience with Falling Kingdoms. I'd be really interested to hear from you guys if you've read this series, if you have any thoughts and feelings about it, down in the comments below. If you are interested in hearing me, you know, talk about Falling Kingdoms, again, it might be a little while, but that is something that I'm definitely not opposed to doing because it's a very interesting series, and it's one of those, like, obviously I've been very nostalgic recently because I've been reading Hunger Games, I've been reading Percy Jackson, but it's just revisiting these series now is so interesting because I think very differently than how I did in high school, and I think a lot of people experience this, so it's cool to go back to the stories that you really loved, because you're gonna get new things out of them, you're gonna get these new insights, and I really think going back now and just seeing where all these characters started out and knowing where they end up, it's crazy. They come so far. They really feel fully dimensional 3D characters. It's so, so cool. There are a few here and there that I wish things could have gone differently. I do wish that Lucia could have had a little bit of a different story. I do wish that Jonas could have come more into where he ends up earlier on, but for the most part, I just think Morgan Rhodes hit it out of the park, and it's a very interesting series, and it's one that I've been thinking about a lot since I finished that book. So that's really all I've got. I needed to get these thoughts out there. Like I said, this isn't like a normal upload, this isn't like a normal video, but hopefully you found some kind of enjoyment out of it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit that like button down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you can talk books with me every week. That is everything I got for you today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!